Naomi Sinclair stood on the front porch of her new home, keys clutched tightly in her hand. At 30 years old, she had finally done it, bought her very own house. It wasn't fancy, just a small 2-bedroom with faded blue siding and a porch that needed work. But it was hers. All hers. No mortgage company can take this away from me, she said to herself, feeling the morning sun warm her face. I paid cash. I own this free and clear. Naomi had achieved what her mother always told her was impossible without a man's help. The thought made her smile. She'd done it all on her own. After years of double shifts at the hospital, saving every penny and living in a tiny apartment, the elderly woman next door, Mrs. Holloway, had already welcomed her with a homemade pie yesterday when the moving truck arrived. Her dog, a rescue mutt named Charlie, bounded across the small front yard, already claiming the territory as his own. Naomi laughed, watching him sniff excitedly at every bush and corner. You like it here, don't you, boy? She had chosen this quiet neighborhood outside Raleigh carefully. It was peaceful, with reasonable neighbors who minded their business. Naomi took a deep breath and looked at the stack of boxes waiting inside. Time to make this house a home. She had just started unpacking her kitchen when Charlie began barking frantically at the front window. What is it, Charlie? Naomi set down a stack of plates and walked to the window. Probably a delivery truck, or... She froze. The door opened and a man stepped out, his back to her as he reached into the back seat for something. A silver SUV had pulled into the driveway of the house on her right. The way he stood, the set of his shoulders, there was something familiar about him. Naomi's heart began to pound as the man turned. No, it couldn't be. His black hair was cut shorter than he used to wear it, and there were hints of silver at his temples, despite him being only 31. Naomi finally managed to ask, crossing her arms over her chest. He wore glasses now, simple rectangular frames that suited his face. I live here. I just bought this house. Julian? But it was Julian Park. The man who had disappeared without a word 10 years ago, leaving her waiting for a call that never came. Checking her email for a message that was never sent. The man who had broken her heart in college. Today's moving day. Julian gestured to his SUV, which was packed with boxes. She leaned against it, her heart racing, tears threatening to spill. His voice trailed off, and he took a step toward her, and reminded her of everything she had worked so hard to forget. Naomi, I can't believe it's you. After all this time... She pulled on her work clothes, old jeans and a faded t-shirt, and set out to repair the loose boards on her back porch. Without thinking, Naomi rushed out the front door, forgetting she was still in her worn-out moving clothes, her hair tied up in a messy bun. The name felt strange on her lips after all these years. She wouldn't let anything take away the joy she felt at finally having a place to call her own. Charlie was in Julian's backyard, happily playing with a sleek black Labrador. Julian stood nearby, smiling as the dogs chased each other. I've had her for about 5 years now. Almost. He turned at the sound of her voice, and the box he was holding slipped from his hands, crashing to the ground. Naomi. His voice was exactly as she remembered. Naomi Sinclair? You disappeared, Julian. No calls. No explanation. Nothing. For a moment, they just stared at each other across the short distance between their driveways. Julian looked different, more mature. Whatever happened 10 years ago doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that I bought this house for peace and quiet. So let's just be neighbors who don't talk to each other, okay? What are you doing here? But since we're going to be neighbors, maybe we could at least be civil. Julian blinked, looking as shocked as she felt. Naomi felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. You what? My brother, Naomi called again, more firmly this time. Come here, boy. Whatever your reason was, you could have picked up a phone. You could have sent an email. You chose not to. I can be civil, that doesn't mean we have to be friends. She left early for her shift at the hospital, where she worked as a nurse in the emergency room. I closed on it last week. No, Naomi shook her head. This can't be happening. You're my next-door neighbor. Naomi had always been good at compartmentalizing, at focusing on the task at hand and pushing everything else aside. The house is perfect. It's the neighbor that's the problem. Julian ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture she remembered all too well. I guess so. Wow, of all the neighborhoods in Raleigh, don't. Naomi held up her hand, stopping him. Just don't. The look of hurt that flashed across his face almost made her waver. Naomi, please, can we talk? It's been 10 years and whose fault is that? The words burst out of her before she could stop them. What did he say when he saw you? Julian, as in the Julian? College boyfriend Julian who broke your heart, Julian? We talked about getting married after graduation, something about a family emergency. She'd had relationships over the years, but whenever things started getting serious, she found a way to end it. It was easier to be alone than to risk being hurt again. No, this house is my fresh start, my independence. I'm not letting Julian Park mess that up for me. I didn't let him finish. The mature thing would be to walk next door and give it to him, but that would mean another interaction, another chance for him to try to explain. What were the chances that, of all the houses in all the neighborhoods in Raleigh, they would end up next door to each other? Julian's shoulders slumped. I know, I don't want to hear it, Naomi cut him off. It was addressed to Julian Park, but the mail carrier had put it in her box by mistake. Before he could respond, Naomi turned and walked back into her house, slamming the door behind her. You know what they say. There's a thin line between love and hate. Why now? Why, after she had finally built a life for herself, did Julian Park have to show up perfect? Julian asked, You're a nurse, right? I think I saw you in scrubs yesterday. She'd drop off the letter and be done with it. That fits. You were always good in a crisis. It had been one of the things she'd loved most about him. She asked, despite herself, What do you do now? The next morning, Naomi woke early, determined not to let Julian's presence ruin her first weekend in her new home. Naomi pulled her hand back as if she'd been burned. The repetitive sound of hammering helped calm her mind, pushing away thoughts of the man next door. This was her house, her sanctuary. She was so focused on her work that she didn't notice Charlie had wandered off until she heard a man's voice and a familiar bark. Charlie, Naomi called, setting down her hammer. Charlie, come here. She walked around to the side of her house and stopped short. You know, I was just telling my daughter that this neighborhood needed some young people. All these empty nesters and retirees. It's nice to see young couples moving in. Sorry, Julian called when he spotted her. There's a gap in the fence. They found each other. Naomi sighed. Charlie, come. Just yourselves. Nothing fancy. Just a barbecue in my backyard. You two must come. I'm Dorothy Holloway. But her dog was having too much fun to listen. I've already invited the Johnsons from across the street and the Murphys from the corner. It'll be the perfect chance for you two to meet everyone. That's Pepper, Julian said, nodding toward the lab. Naomi didn't want to engage, but basic politeness won out. Charlie's a rescue. I got him last year. An awkward silence fell between them. Look, Naomi, Julian finally said, I know you don't want to talk about the past, and I respect that. Naomi crossed her arms. Julian nodded, the hurt evident in his eyes. Fair enough. Charlie! Finally, her dog trotted over, looking pleased with himself. I'll fix that gap in the fence today, Julian offered. Don't bother, Naomi replied. I can handle it myself. Still independent as ever, I see, Julian said softly. The comment hit too close to home. You don't know me anymore, Julian. You lost that right 10 years ago. She turned to leave, but Julian's voice stopped her. I had a family emergency, he said. That's why I left school so suddenly. Save it, Naomi interrupted. She didn't wait for his response, just called Charlie and walked back to her house, trying to ignore the weight of Julian's gaze on her back. By Monday morning, Naomi had managed to avoid Julian for the rest of the weekend, despite the fact that their houses were barely 30 feet apart. The familiar chaos of the ER was a welcome distraction from her personal life. You seem distracted today, her friend and fellow nurse Tanya commented during their lunch break. Everything okay with the new house? Naomi hesitated, then sighed. Uh-oh, let me guess. Loud music? Nosy? Too many cats? Worse, Naomi replied. It's Julian. Tanya's eyes widened. Naomi nodded grimly. The very same. Girl, what are the odds? Tanya shook her head in disbelief. He tried to explain why he disappeared. Tanya studied her friend's face. You still have feelings for him. I do not, Naomi protested. I'm angry, there's a difference. Tanya hummed skeptically. There's nothing thin about it, Naomi insisted. He ghosted me, Tanya. After 2 years together, we had plans. And you never dated anyone seriously since, Tanya pointed out gently. Naomi fell silent. It was true. Maybe this is fate giving you both a second chance, Tanya suggested. Naomi shook her head firmly. But as she drove home that evening, Naomi couldn't help wondering if Tanya might be right. She pushed the thought away as she pulled into her driveway. Fate had nothing to do with it. It was just bad luck. The next day, Naomi was sorting through her mail when she realized she had a letter that wasn't hers. She stared at the envelope for a long moment, debating what to do. With a sigh, she decided to just leave it in his mailbox when he wasn't around. Naomi stepped outside and glanced at Julian's house. No car in the driveway. She was halfway to his mailbox when Julian's front door opened and he stepped out, startling her. Naomi? He looked surprised to see her. You got my mail, she blurted, holding up the envelope. Oh. Julian walked down his front steps toward her. Thanks for bringing it over. They reached for the envelope at the same time, their fingers brushing. Sorry, Julian said, taking the envelope. An awkward silence fell between them. How's work? Naomi was surprised he'd noticed. Yes, emergency room. Julian nodded. The comment brought back memories of their time together, how she'd talked him through panic attacks before big exams, how she'd stayed calm when they got lost hiking in the mountains. What about you? I teach music at the community college, Julian replied. Piano and violin mostly. Of course he did. Julian had always been talented, his hands creating magic on piano keys, his soul seeming to flow through the violin when he played. Before Naomi could respond, Mrs. Holloway called out from the yard on the other side of Naomi's house. Yoo-hoo, Naomi dear. Naomi turned to see the elderly woman making her way toward them, a wide smile on her face. Oh, and you must be the young man who moved in next door, Mrs. Holloway said, extending her hand to Julian. Julian Park, he replied, shaking her hand. Nice to meet you. Mrs. Holloway looked between them, her smile growing wider. And you two already know each other. How wonderful. We went to college together, Naomi explained quickly. Old friends then, even better. Mrs. Holloway clasped her hands together. Oh, we're not. Naomi started to correct her. I'm having a little neighborhood get-together this weekend, Mrs. Holloway continued, not hearing Naomi's protest. That's very kind, but, Julian began. I won't take no for an answer, Mrs. Holloway insisted. Saturday at 4. Before either of them could object further, Mrs. Holloway was already walking back to her house, calling over her shoulder, and don't worry about bringing anything. Naomi and Julian stood in awkward silence for a moment. Well, that happened, Julian finally said, a hint of amusement in his voice. She thinks we're a couple, Naomi said, horrified. We could correct her at the barbecue, Julian suggested, if we go. You don't want to disappoint Mrs. Holloway, do you? There was a challenge in Julian's eyes. She seems sweet, Naomi sighed. Fine, we'll go, correct her misunderstanding, and that's it. I meant what I said. The past is the past. Let's just try to be neighbors who don't make each other's lives difficult, okay? Julian's expression softened. Naomi, I know you don't want to hear it, but I really am sorry for how things ended between us. I never... Stop, Naomi held up her hand. And deep down, in a place she didn't want to acknowledge, part of her wondered what he had been about to say. Julian looked like he wanted to say more, but he just nodded. Okay. Naomi did her best to avoid Julian, but it seemed like the universe was conspiring against her. Their dogs kept finding ways to visit each other, despite her attempts to block the gap in the fence. They reached for their newspapers at the same time one morning, and worst of all, their trash cans had to be placed side by side at the curb, leading to yet another awkward encounter. As Naomi walked back to her house, she couldn't help feeling that despite her best efforts, Julian Park was already complicating her life again. she exclaimed, hugging Naomi and then Julian. "Everyone, come meet our new neighbors." Naomi met the Johnsons, a retired couple who had lived in the neighborhood for 30 years, the Murphys, who had 2 teenage children, and several other neighbors whose names she tried to remember. It was a trait she had once loved about him, his ability to make anyone feel comfortable. The rest of the week passed in a blur of work shifts and house projects. By Saturday, Naomi was dreading Mrs. Holloway's barbecue. Mrs. Murphy asked as they stood near the food table. "We knew each other in college, but we're not a couple." He wore khaki shorts and a blue button-down shirt that brought out the warmth in his brown eyes. He still looked good, annoyingly good. "Remember, we're going to correct Mrs. Holloway's assumption." "That's a shame. You look good together," he asked with a small smile. She stood in front of her closet, trying to decide what to wear. "We should probably make sure Mrs. Holloway knows the truth. Excuse us." "And I've regretted it every day since." "Yes, Julian, it is. The way you two were talking when I saw you the other day, because we're not together. But you're both still welcome, of course. Separately, not as a couple. We haven't been for 10 years. Though I have to admit, this is not how I pictured spending my Saturday afternoon, explaining to a bunch of strangers that we are not dating, because you left. Not exactly what I had in mind either. Nothing too nice. She didn't want Julian to think she was trying to impress him, but nothing too casual either, since she would be meeting other neighbors. She finally settled on a simple sundress with a light cardigan, her curly black hair left loose around her shoulders. But then, Naomi remembered why they were in this situation in the first place, and her smile faded. Of course, no pretending to be a couple. "Make my excuses to Mrs. Holloway, will you? Why had Julian disappeared from her life without a word? I know you don't want to hear about the past, but I need you to know something. I never wanted to hurt you. What happened?" As she reached her front door, she glanced back to see him still standing in Mrs. Holloway's yard, watching her. The unanswered calls, the emails that went unread. It had been her favorite book, and Julian had given her this special edition for their first anniversary. The horrible emptiness that came with not knowing why. When she stepped outside at 10 minutes to 4, Julian was just leaving his house as well. Organizing might help clear her mind. Ready to face the neighborhood, and wit captured my heart. Love always, Julian. As I'll ever be, Naomi replied. Naomi moved to the window and peered out. Julian stood on his back porch, violin tucked under his chin, playing a melody she recognized immediately. It was the piece he had composed for her birthday a lifetime ago. Julian held up his hands. "Let me get a picture of you two in front of my rose bushes. They're just starting to bloom." The explanation for why Julian had left without a word. They walked side by side to Mrs. Holloway's backyard, where several people were already gathered around a grill. Mrs. Holloway spotted them immediately and hurried over. For a moment, their eyes met across the distance between their houses. The postmark was dated 10 years ago, just days after Julian had disappeared from her life. To leave it sealed would be to continue living with questions that had haunted her for a decade. She tossed and turned, memories of college days with Julian playing through her mind like an old movie. But her thoughts kept drifting to the man next door, to the past they shared and the questions that remained unanswered, the way he used to surprise her with little notes hidden in her textbooks. Julian's familiar handwriting filled the page, bringing back memories of notes passed in class and birthday cards cherished. A letter from Julian? How had she never noticed it before? How he would play the violin for her when she was stressed about exams. Who encouraged me to play the violin when Dad thought it was a waste of time? The thought of losing him is unbearable. You deserve an explanation, even if it comes too late. I've been living in his shadow for so long, trying to be the perfect son, the perfect student, the perfect boyfriend. But I'm not perfect, Naomi. I'm scared and confused, and I don't know who I am without David showing me the way. I don't know if I'll ever have the courage to face you again after leaving the way I did. Time away from school, away from the pressure, away from everything. I love the way your eyes light up when you laugh. I love how you always stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. I love the person I am when I'm with you, including you. The way he looked at her as if she were the most fascinating person in the world. Had she put it there herself and forgotten? Or had the letter arrived after she'd already packed her things, devastated by Julian's disappearance? We're just neighbors who happened to know each other years ago. I can't be what anyone needs. I have to find out who I really am, not who everyone expects me to be. She'd always assumed he'd transferred to another school, started a new life without her. She had questions now, so many questions. But it was late, past midnight. Those questions would have to wait until morning. But what if he'd been dealing with grief, with loss? Mum's call came at 2 a.m., and all I could think about was getting on the first flight out. I thought I'd call you from the airport, but then David took a turn for the worse and everything else just disappeared. The doctors don't think he's going to make it. I'm sending this to your campus mailbox. I hope it finds you before the semester ends. All these years, she'd believed Julian had simply abandoned her, that what they'd shared had meant nothing to him. But the truth was far more complicated. You came. The next hour was a blur of introductions and small talk. To her surprise, Julian stayed by her side throughout it all, smoothly joining conversations and making people laugh with his easy charm. So how long have you two been together? Have you two? Julian's brother. She remembered him mentioning David a few times, the golden boy of the Park family, the successful one who had made their parents proud. Julian had always spoken of him with a mixture of admiration and something else, a need to measure up. Oh, we're not, Naomi started to explain. We're just neighbors, Julian finished for her. Though Mrs. Holloway seems determined to play matchmaker, Naomi added with a forced laugh. Mrs. Murphy looked disappointed. Naomi felt her cheeks grow warm. She moved away from the table, Julian following. This is getting awkward, she muttered to him. Everyone thinks we're together. Is that so terrible? Julian asked softly. Naomi turned to face him. The hurt in Julian's eyes made her regret her harsh tone, but she couldn't take the words back. I know, he said quietly. Before Naomi could respond, Mrs. Holloway appeared with a camera. Mrs. Holloway, Naomi said gently, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Julian and I aren't a couple. Mrs. Holloway's face fell. Oh, I'm so sorry, I just assumed. It's an easy mistake, Julian assured her. No harm done. Well, I feel silly now, Mrs. Holloway said, flustered. As Mrs. Holloway walked away, Naomi felt a pang of guilt. I think we embarrassed her. She'll be fine, Julian said. Despite herself, Naomi laughed. For a moment, it felt like old times, the easy banter, the shared humor. I should go, she said. I've got an early shift tomorrow. Julian nodded, disappointment evident in his eyes. Naomi, before you go... Julian, please, Naomi interrupted. Not here, not now. Then when? He asked. You can't avoid this conversation forever, especially since we live next door to each other. Naomi knew he was right, but she wasn't ready. I need to go. She turned and walked away, feeling Julian's eyes on her back. For the first time since seeing him again, Naomi allowed herself to wonder what had really happened 10 years ago. And more importantly, why did a part of her still care? That night, Naomi couldn't sleep, and then the crushing pain when he vanished. Around midnight, she gave up on sleep and went to her small home office, where boxes of books still waited to be unpacked. As she sorted through the books, a particular volume caught her eye. A worn copy of Pride and Prejudice that she'd carried with her since college. Naomi hesitated, then opened it. On the inside cover, Julian had written, To my own Elizabeth Bennet, whose pride the words blurred as tears filled her eyes. She had forgotten about this inscription, had blocked out so many memories of their time together because they hurt too much. A sudden noise from outside startled her, the soft, haunting sound of a violin. As the final notes drifted through the night air, Naomi saw Julian look up toward her window. Then Naomi stepped back, letting the curtain fall. She returned to the stack of books, trying to focus on organizing. The book in her hands slipped, falling open to reveal something tucked between its pages, an envelope yellowed with age, addressed to her in Julian's handwriting. Naomi stared at it, her heart pounding. With trembling fingers, she picked up the envelope. Naomi sat down heavily, the unopened letter in her hands feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Here perhaps were the answers she had waited so long for. But did she want to know now after all this time? After she had finally built a life for herself, a home of her own? Outside, the violin began to play again, the melody drifting through the quiet night, bridging the space between their houses, between their past and present. Naomi looked down at the letter, Julian's handwriting, a ghost from the past. To open it would be to reopen wounds she had worked so hard to heal. The violin's song grew more intense, as if Julian were pouring his heart into every note. Naomi took a deep breath and broke the seal on the envelope. With trembling hands, Naomi unfolded the letter. The paper was thin and slightly yellowed from age. She took a deep breath and began to read. Dear Naomi, if you're reading this, it means you're willing to hear me out, even if it's just through these words on paper. I'm writing this from the hospital in Seattle. My brother David was in a car accident 3 days ago. It's bad, Naomi. I know I should have called you before I left campus, but everything happened so fast. He's my big brother, Naomi. The one who taught me how to ride a bike, who protected me from bullies, but that's no excuse for how I've treated you. You deserve better than silence. The truth is, watching David fight for his life has forced me to face some hard truths about myself. I think I need some time to figure things out. That's the hardest part to write, because I love you, Naomi, but I can't be what you need right now. I don't expect you to wait for me. I don't even expect you to forgive me, but I hope someday you'll understand. All my love, Julian P.S. Naomi stared at the letter, tears streaming down her face. The letter had never reached her. Somehow it had ended up in this book, a book she hadn't opened in years. Outside, the violin had stopped playing. The silence felt heavy, filled with 10 years of misunderstandings and lost chances. Naomi wiped her tears and looked at the letter again. But had David survived the accident? Julian had never returned to campus after he left. Naomi folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. As she crawled into bed, her mind was spinning with thoughts of Julian, of the past, of what might have been if this letter had reached her 10 years ago. Sleep came eventually, but it was filled with dreams of a younger Julian playing his violin while she listened, unaware that their time together was about to end. The next morning, Naomi woke early despite her restless night. She made coffee and sat at her kitchen table, Julian's letter in front of her. When she opened it, Julian stood on her porch, looking as if he hadn't slept much either. In the light of day, her emotions were more confused than ever. Part of her felt relief at finally knowing why he had left so suddenly. Another part felt anger that he hadn't tried harder to contact her, and beneath it all was a current of sadness for everything they had lost. He looked up at her, his eyes wide. You never got it? She was so lost in thought that she almost didn't hear the knock at her front door. I saw your light on last night, he said. Late. I found something last night, she said, leading him to the kitchen table where the letter lay. I never read this until now. It was tucked inside a book. I thought maybe you were having trouble sleeping too. Naomi hesitated, then stepped back, inviting him in. The man before her now carried visible scars from his loss. Julian stared at the envelope, recognition dawning on his face. My letter, the one I sent from Seattle. It was disconnected. I emailed you, but never got a response. I even drove to your mum's house once, but she told me you'd moved and wouldn't give me your new address. She said... He hesitated. She said I'd done enough damage. I thought you'd read it and decided I wasn't worth responding to. Naomi shook her head. Not until last night. After you left, I couldn't bear seeing the empty inbox, always hoping for a message from you. And Mom, she's always been protective, especially after my dad left. Her grades had slipped, she'd withdrawn from friends, and she'd ultimately changed her major from pre-med to nursing, a decision that had disappointed her mother greatly. Eventually, I went back to school, different state. Got my degree in music education. I built a life, she said, a good one. I have a job I love, friends, this house now. But there have been times... She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Times when I wondered about you too. Now this... She gestured to the letter. I need time. Taught high school for a few years before moving to the community college level. Naomi, I know finding that letter doesn't erase 10 years. It doesn't undo the hurt. But now that you know the truth, do you think, is there any chance we could at least try to be friends? Friends, Julian paused. And I never stopped thinking about you, wondering where you were, what you were doing, if you were happy. Julian sank into a chair, running a hand through his hair. All this time, I thought, they would wave when they saw each other outside. Sometimes they'd chat briefly about neighborhood matters or the weather. Nothing deep, nothing personal. Just two neighbors being civil. But the bags were heavy and her back was already protesting. Everything they'd lost. It was comfortable, this quiet cooperation, reminiscent of how they used to study together in college, each doing their own work but drawing strength from the other's presence. I remember how you used to talk about having a big yard someday filled with flowers, and I thought you'd just disappeared without caring enough to explain. It wasn't your fault. And you always teased me about my black thumb. For what it's worth, Naomi, seeing you again, only killed 2 succulents in the past year. And sometimes, when their dogs played together in the yard, she would stay outside a little longer than necessary, enjoying the easy conversation that flowed between them in those unguarded moments. It feels like the first piece of good luck I've had in a very long time. Not entirely. I realized I wanted something different. Being a nurse suits me better. I like the direct patient care, the human connection. The weight of 10 years of misunderstandings hung between them. He died 5 days after I wrote that letter. Brain trauma from the accident, he never woke up. You need time. We'd love some, wouldn't we, Naomi? I'll bring them over tomorrow, Mrs. Holloway said happily. They'll make your shared yard look so pretty. I thought you might like some for your yard too. The ones with the pink blooms would look lovely along your shared property line. She's determined to matchmake, isn't she? I'm not pushing. Naomi couldn't help smiling. Julian asked, his voice gentle. Letting people think there might be something between us? I think we're fighting a losing battle. I wanted you to know that. It was easier this way, and besides, she was starting to enjoy these moments when they acted as a team. Your brother, Naomi said softly. Did he? Julian's face tightened with pain. I'm so sorry, Julian. The words felt inadequate for such a profound loss. It broke something in my family, Julian continued, his voice low. When she opened it, Julian stood there looking troubled. If he had a girlfriend or a wife even, though she hadn't seen a ring on his finger, that was his affair. I wanted to explain before you jumped to any conclusions. My father retreated into work, my mother into grief, and I fell apart. Through the window, she could see him talking with a woman, tall, elegantly dressed, with long, straight hair. They appeared to be in an intense conversation. The words hit Naomi with unexpected force. Of course, Julian had moved on with his life, had married someone else. Why wouldn't he have? Julian hesitated. That was my ex-wife, Mina. Impulsive. Honestly, I needed a fresh start. The community college had an opening in their music department. The neighborhood seemed quiet, and he paused. And maybe a part of me was looking for something I'd lost. The woman gestured emphatically, while Julian shook his head, his posture rigid, just sad. We wanted different things. She's a corporate lawyer, very career-focused. I wanted a family. Julian's eyes held Naomi's. I always did. I couldn't go back to school, couldn't face anyone, couldn't even pick up my violin for almost 2 years. Naomi thought about the Julian she had known in college, confident, talented, always smiling, had loved someone else enough to commit his life to her. It shouldn't hurt. They had been apart for a decade, both living separate lives. But it did hurt, in a way Naomi hadn't expected. She said something to Julian, who turned to look toward Naomi's house. Embarrassed at being caught spying, Naomi quickly stepped away from the window. Why didn't you try to contact me again? She asked, the question that had haunted her for years finally spoken aloud. Julian met her gaze. I did. 6 months after David died, when I started to put myself back together, I called your old number. Naomi closed her eyes. Of course her mother would say that. After Julian disappeared, Naomi had been devastated. I changed my email address, Naomi said quietly. She blamed me for derailing your plans to become a doctor. Naomi shrugged. About Mina. So you wouldn't think I was hiding something from you? Julian nodded, a small smile touching his lips. You were always good at connecting with people, at seeing what they needed. Another silence fell between them, less tense than before, but still weighted with unresolved feelings. What happened after? Naomi finally asked. After David died. I stayed in Seattle for a while, trying to help my parents. The raw honesty in his voice made Naomi's heart ache. Julian reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. Friends. Such a simple word for such a complicated relationship. I don't know, Julian, Naomi answered honestly. This is a lot to process. Finding you next door was shocking enough. Time I can give, Julian said, standing up. We're neighbors after all. I'm not going anywhere. As he walked to the door, he turned back. After he left, Naomi sat at her kitchen table for a long time, the letter still in front of her, Julian's words echoing in her mind. Could they really be just friends after everything they'd shared? And why, despite all the pain of the past, did a part of her hope for something more? Over the next 2 weeks, Naomi and Julian settled into a cautious new routine, but Naomi found herself watching for him, listening for the sound of his violin in the evenings. One evening, as Naomi was struggling to carry several bags of mulch from her car to her backyard for a gardening project, Julian appeared at her driveway. Need a hand? He offered. Naomi's first instinct was to refuse, to prove she could handle it alone, as she had handled everything in her life for the past decade. Actually, yes, she admitted. Thanks. They worked side by side, carrying the bags to the flower beds Naomi had started to create along her back fence. You always loved gardening, Julian commented as they finished. Naomi smiled, surprised he remembered such a detail. Julian laughed. Because you killed every houseplant you ever owned. I've gotten better, Naomi protested, but she was laughing too. Impressive progress, Julian said with mock seriousness. Their laughter faded into a comfortable silence as they stood looking at the flower beds, the setting sun casting a warm glow over the yard. I missed this, Julian said softly. Naomi knew he wasn't talking about gardening. Julian. I know, he interrupted. Before she could respond, Mrs. Holloway called from over the fence. Yoo-hoo, Naomi, Julian. They turned to see the elderly woman waving at them. I've been planting some new flowers for summer, Mrs. Holloway said. Naomi and Julian exchanged a glance. Despite their correction at the barbecue, Mrs. Holloway seemed determined to treat them as a unit. That's very thoughtful, Julian called back. Naomi nodded, not bothering to correct the we. Wonderful. As Mrs. Holloway disappeared back into her house, Naomi turned to Julian with a raised eyebrow. Shared yard? Julian shrugged, a grin tugging at his lips. Apparently so. Would that be so terrible? The question hung in the air, loaded with possibilities. I should get inside, Naomi said, not ready to answer. Early shift tomorrow. Julian nodded, understanding in his eyes. Good night, Naomi. As she watched him walk back to his house, Naomi realized something unsettling. The walls she had built around her heart were beginning to crumble, brick by careful brick. The following Tuesday, Naomi arrived home from work to find an unfamiliar car in Julian's driveway, a sleek black Mercedes that looked expensive and out of place in their modest neighborhood. She tried not to be curious, but as she was unloading groceries from her trunk, she couldn't help glancing toward Julian's house. Naomi told herself it was none of her business. Julian's life was his own. But the sight of the woman stirred something uncomfortable in Naomi's chest, something that felt alarmingly like jealousy. She was just closing her front door when she heard raised voices from Julian's yard. Despite her better judgment, Naomi peeked through her window. Julian and the woman stood on his porch now, clearly arguing. Suddenly the woman spotted Naomi watching. A few minutes later, as she was putting away her groceries, there was a knock at her door. Sorry to bother you, he said, but I saw you noticed my visitor. You don't owe me any explanations, Naomi said, though a part of her was relieved he had come over. I think I do. Ex-wife. She's not happy about the divorce, Julian continued, or about me moving here. She thought it was too... When did you get divorced? Naomi asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. The paperwork was finalized 2 months ago, but we've been separated for over a year. Naomi processed this information, unsure how to feel about it. Why did you move here? To Raleigh, I mean. Julian ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made Naomi's heart ache. The implication hung between them, unspoken but understood. Was it a bad divorce? Naomi asked, surprising herself with the personal question. Not particularly. The weight of that statement, of all the years and choices that separated them, felt suddenly overwhelming. Julian, You don't have to say anything, he interrupted gently. I just wanted you to know. Naomi nodded, grateful for his honesty yet unsure what to do with it. Thank you for telling me. After Julian left, Naomi sat on her couch, trying to sort through her conflicting emotions. Julian had been married, and beneath the hurt was a troubling realization. She cared about Julian's past, his present, his future. She cared about him, despite all her efforts not to. The next day, Naomi came home to find a package on her porch, a small box wrapped in simple brown paper with her name written on it in Julian's handwriting. Inside was a beautiful ceramic planter and a healthy-looking succulent. A note was tucked beside it. For your collection, this one's nearly impossible to kill, I promise. J. The thoughtfulness of the gift, the way it referenced their inside joke about her black thumb, made Naomi smile. It was exactly the kind of thing the old Julian would have done, remembered a small detail, and turned it into something meaningful. Before she could overthink it, Naomi walked next door and knocked. When Julian answered, she held up the plant. Thank you. It's perfect. Julian's smile was warm. I thought you could use a fighting chance with this one. Really talked, for the first time since finding each other again. Want to come in? I just made iced tea. I'd like that. The invitation surprised them both, but Julian nodded. Anne married thinking they wanted the same things, only to discover their differences too late. Naomi shared stories of her journey through nursing school, her struggle to save for this house, her decision to remain single rather than settle for relationships that didn't feel right. Naomi, I know we can't go back to what we were, there was that word again. But this time it didn't feel like settling, it felt like a beginning. Too much has happened. But do you think, could we start over, as friends, getting to know each other again? They sat on Naomi's back porch, watching their dogs play together in the yard while they sipped their drinks and talked. When he left, it nearly destroyed her. So I learned to be independent, to rely only on myself, Julian asked, his eyes serious. Gradually, they filled in the gaps of the past 10 years, rebuilding the foundation of friendship that had once been so strong between them. A pull toward Julian that became harder to ignore with each passing day. Do you still believe that? This Julian was different from the boy she had known in college, more grounded, more thoughtful, shaped by loss and experience, and somehow even more compelling. Walking their dogs together through the neighborhood. Define close. We talk once a month. She lives in Florida now with her third husband. Thank you. She still thinks I wasted my potential by becoming a nurse instead of a doctor. Julian told her about his marriage to Mina, how they'd met at a faculty party, dated for 2 years. No, she just warned me to keep my distance, to protect myself. My mother always warned me not to need anyone the way she needed my father, Naomi admitted. Julian's voice was soft, but his question cut to the heart of things. Keeping your distance? Protecting yourself? In the dim light of the porch, Julian's eyes were serious, searching hers for an answer she wasn't sure she was ready to give. And after I disappeared, Julian said quietly, that lesson was reinforced. When you showed up next door, all I wanted was to avoid you, to keep the life I'd built safe from whatever this is between us. Naomi nodded. I decided love wasn't worth the risk. It would be so easy to lean forward, to close the distance between them, to give in to the pull she had been fighting since the day he reappeared in her life. The way you talk about your patience, because I still remember how much it hurt when you disappeared from my life, but I also remember how it felt to be with you. I can't undo the past, Naomi. I wish I could. But I can promise you this. I'm not the same person who left without saying goodbye. She ran through the rain to her own house, her heart pounding with more than just exertion. Julian's words echoed in her mind. I'm not going anywhere this time. I've learned the hard way what matters most in life. For so long she had defined herself by her independence, by her ability to stand alone. But was that really strength? Or was it just another kind of fear? And sometimes when we're sitting like this talking, it feels like no time has passed at all. But beneath the chaos, a quiet certainty was beginning to form, a recognition that some chances were worth taking, even at the risk of pain. The care in your voice. Some people are born healers, Naomi. You're one of them. Naomi woke early, her mind made up. Today she would talk to Julian, really talk to him, about the past, about the present, about what might lie ahead for them. Oh, Julian's voice was gentle. I told you, Naomi, I'm staying this time. I thought. When he spotted Naomi, he set down the box and walked toward her. Rain began to blow onto the porch, forcing them to retreat inside. Things she left behind that she's finally coming to collect. Last night after you left, I got a call from the community college. After everything, he was willing to move away if that's what she wanted. They've offered me a permanent position starting this fall, department chair for music. And I need to know, Pals, is that going to be a problem for you? Having me next door permanently? That is, I was wondering if maybe you'd like to have dinner with me tonight. Not as neighbors or friends, but as a date. She thought about second chances and whether some people might be worth risking your heart for. Because if it is, I can look for another house, give you the space you need. And now, before Naomi could answer, her phone rang. The hospital calling her in for an emergency shift. The conversation would have to wait. Such a simple word for such a significant step. Get to know each other again. No rushing. Oh, good morning, you two. I was just about to ask if you might help me plant those flowers along your property line today. She nodded, and he called back, We'd be happy to, Mrs. Holloway. The ones I mentioned? As Julian was leaving, he paused at her door. Naomi asked, trying to keep the hurt from her voice. After everything you said about not going anywhere. Slow is good. If we have time now. It was about second chances and forgiveness and the possibility of love. Two separate spaces, two separate lives, connected by a shared past and perhaps a shared future. Friends. She tried on and discarded 3 outfits before settling on a simple blue dress that brought out the warmth in her brown skin. But there was something exciting about it too. The possibility of rediscovery, of building something new on the foundation of what they once had. As she applied her makeup, she couldn't help but remember their first date in college. How nervous she had been, how Julian had brought her wildflowers he'd picked himself from the campus gardens. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to let them, they can help make a house feel even more like home. They were just the beginning. I'll walk you over with an umbrella. I'd like that, Naomi said, and meant it. Over the next week, a new pattern emerged. Coffee on Naomi's porch before her afternoon shifts. Julian bringing over takeout when she worked late. They talked about everything and nothing. Books they'd read, movies they'd seen, places they'd traveled. But beneath the casual conversations, Naomi felt something else growing, a connection that went beyond friendship. She caught herself watching him when he wasn't looking, the way his hands moved when he talked about music, the crinkles around his eyes when he laughed, the gentle way he treated their elderly neighbors. One evening, as they sat on Julian's back porch listening to a summer thunderstorm roll in, he asked about her mother. You never mention her, he observed. Are you still close? Naomi sighed, watching the lightning flash in the distance. That's unfair, Julian said. You're amazing at what you do. How would you know? Naomi asked, not unkindly. Julian smiled. His words warmed her in a way she hadn't expected. Have you told her about me? About us being neighbors? Naomi shook her head. And is that what you're doing? The rain began to fall harder, drumming on the roof above them. I don't know what I'm doing anymore, Naomi admitted. And now? Naomi took a deep breath. Now I'm confused. Julian reached across the space between them, his hand covering hers. The warmth of his hand on hers sent a current through Naomi's body. awakening feelings she had buried long ago. But fear held her back, fear of being hurt again, of losing herself in someone else, of undoing all the work she had done to become strong and independent. "Julian, A crash of thunder directly overhead made them both jump, and the moment was broken. "I should go," Naomi said, suddenly needing space to think, "before the storm gets worse." Julian nodded, though disappointment flashed in his eyes. "No need, it's just next door, I won't melt." But as she stepped off his porch into the pouring rain, Julian called after her. "Naomi!" She turned back, the rain already soaking through her clothes. "I meant what I said. I'm not the same person who left, and I'm not going anywhere this time." Naomi nodded, unable to find words for the emotions swirling inside her. Inside, she leaned against her closed door, breathing hard. Could she believe him? More importantly, could she trust herself to open her heart again, to risk the pain for the possibility of something beautiful? As she changed out of her wet clothes, Naomi caught sight of herself in the mirror. The storm raged outside, mirroring the turmoil in her heart. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed away the summer humidity. But as she stepped outside to retrieve her newspaper, she saw something that made her heart sink, a moving truck in Julian's driveway. Julian emerged from his house carrying a box, which he loaded into the truck. "Morning," he said, his expression unreadable. "You're moving?" Julian looked confused for a moment, then understanding dawned. No, I'm not moving, that's Mina's stuff." Relief washed over Naomi, followed by embarrassment at her reaction. "That I was leaving again." Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, a certainty, a recognition of what they both wanted but had been afraid to acknowledge. "Julian, I need to tell you something," he interrupted, his expression serious. "Julian, that's wonderful." "It means I'm officially putting down roots here," he continued. Naomi stared at him, struck by the selflessness of his offer. "No," she said firmly. "That's not a problem at all." Relief flooded Julian's face. "Good, because I was hoping—" A date. Naomi thought about all the reasons she should say no. The past pain, the fear of being hurt again, her mother's warnings about needing anyone too much. But then she thought about the letter she had found, about the music Julian played in the evenings, about the way he remembered she killed houseplants and brought her one that was hard to kill. "Yes," she said, surprising herself with how right it felt. "I'd like that." Julian's smile was like the sun coming out. "Really?" "Really," Naomi confirmed, her own smile growing. "But on one condition." "Name it." "We take things slow." Julian nodded, his eyes serious despite his smile. As if to seal their agreement, Charlie and Pepper came bounding around the side of the house, having found yet another way through the fence to be together. "I think our dogs approve," Julian laughed. "They've been trying to tell us something all along," Naomi said, watching the two animals play together happily. Mrs. Holloway's voice called from her yard. Julian looked at Naomi, a question in his eyes. As Mrs. Holloway chattered about what varieties would look best, Julian reached for Naomi's hand, his fingers lacing through hers. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental, a bridge across 10 years of separation, a promise of something new beginning. "So," Julian said softly, "dinner tonight." "Dinner tonight," Naomi agreed, squeezing his hand. And in that moment, standing in the morning sunlight with Julian beside her, Naomi realized something important. The house she had worked so hard to buy, the independence she had guarded so fiercely, they weren't the end of her journey. Real strength wasn't about standing alone. It was about having the courage to let someone in, even knowing the risks. As Mrs. Holloway continued planning their shared garden, Naomi looked at her house, then at Julian's. For the first time since finding Julian on her doorstep, Naomi felt not dread but hope. Hope that sometimes the people who leave can find their way back. Naomi spent more time than usual getting ready for her date with Julian. This was different. They were different. Older, more cautious, carrying the weight of their shared past. Julian arrived precisely at 7, standing on her porch with a small bouquet of daisies, her favorite flowers. Another detail he had remembered. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes taking her in with appreciation. "You clean up pretty well yourself," Naomi replied, noting how handsome he looked in dark jeans and a crisp button-down shirt. Julian had made reservations at a small Italian restaurant downtown, intimate but not too romantic, perfect for a first date that wasn't really a first date. Over pasta and wine, they talked not about the past, but about the present. Julian's excitement about his new position at the college, Naomi's recent promotion to charge nurse in the ER. It was comfortable, easy, but with an undercurrent of anticipation that made Naomi's skin tingle whenever their eyes met. "Tell me something I don't know about you," Julian said as they shared a tiramisu for dessert. "Something from these past 10 years. Naomi thought for a moment. "Really? But after you left, I wanted to understand what made music so important to you. So I took lessons. I still practice sometimes. Your turn. Tell me something I don't know about you. You were always so convinced you had no musical talent. I wanted to give that gift to others who needed it." He was both familiar and new, a complex blend of past and present that intrigued her more with each revelation. "I learned to play the piano." Julian's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "I'd love to hear you play sometime." "I'm not very good," Naomi admitted with a laugh. She squeezed his hand. "Of feeling something again, of letting you back into my life and risking. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. In that moment, standing by the river with the stars coming out above them, she made her decision. Us. Leaving you the way I did was the biggest. I can't change that. I'm not the same girl you knew in college. I've built a life I'm proud of. I won't give up my independence, not even for you. But I can promise you that if you give us, another chance, I won't make that mistake again." Everything. This was what had always set Julian apart, his ability to understand her, to see her clearly. The admission seemed to touch Julian deeply. But I also know that some things are worth the risk. The woman you've become, strong, independent, determined, that's who I'm interested in getting to know better, not who you were 10 years ago. Under the soft glow of her porch light, they stood facing each other, the moment heavy with unspoken questions. "Maybe," Naomi said, feeling suddenly shy. Instead, he placed a gentle kiss on her cheek, his lips warm against her skin. "I started a youth orchestra program in Seattle for kids who couldn't afford instruments or lessons. It's still running, even though I've moved away." Julian took a sip of his wine. So much had changed between them, and yet that simple touch had sent the same thrill through her that it had when they were younger. "That's incredible, Julian." He shrugged, but she could tell he was proud. "Music saved me after David died." As they talked, Naomi realized something important. The Julian sitting across from her wasn't just the boy she had loved in college, nor was he a stranger. They still had their separate lives, Naomi's shifts at the hospital, Julian's preparations for the fall semester, but they carved out time for each other whenever they could. After dinner, they walked along the downtown Riverwalk, the summer evening warm and fragrant with honeysuckle. Weekend afternoons spent working side by side on their yards, much to Mrs. Holloway's delight. Julian's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally, as if they had never been apart. She tried not to eavesdrop, but couldn't help overhearing bits of Julian's conversation. He checked the caller ID and frowned. "Thank you for saying yes," Julian said softly. "To dinner, I mean. The anniversary of David's death is coming up next month. She always gets difficult around this time." Julian's fingers drummed lightly on the steering wheel in time with the soft jazz playing on the radio. Another thing that hadn't changed about him. He had always had music running through his veins, expressing itself in small, unconscious ways. Julian pressed his hands into the soil, working it more forcefully than necessary. It's like she's still stuck in that hospital room 10 years ago, like a part of her died with him and never came back. And like every year, she'll spend the whole time talking about what David would have done with his life if he'd lived, the career he would have had, the family. And partly because he hesitated, then continued softly. "Because I never really got over you, Naomi. Even during my marriage, there was always this space inside me that remembered what we had. I almost said no, Naomi admitted. I was scared. Opening herself to Julian again was scary, yes, but there was also an excitement to it, a sense of possibility that had been missing from her carefully constructed life. No, I can't just drop everything and come out there. I understand you miss him, we all do, and I'm going to try to talk to her about moving forward, about how David wouldn't have wanted us to live in the past. Naomi found herself stealing glances at Julian, seeing him with new eyes. The boy who had left her had been running from pain, trying to find himself in the aftermath of tragedy. The man beside her now was still carrying burdens, but he was facing them head-on. And you? Where are you in all this? It's been 10 years. No, I'm not saying that. Trying to be the son she needed me to be. She had the weekend off for once and wanted to cook for him, something she rarely had time to do with her busy schedule. As she moved around her kitchen, the familiar scents brought back memories of Sunday dinners at her grandparents' house, the one place where she had always felt secure as a child. She too had spent years defining herself in opposition to something, her mother's dependence, Julian's abandonment. Something for the house, he explained, handing it to her. Perhaps they both needed to let go of the past to find their way forward. He paused. But lately I've been thinking it's time to live my own life, to stop measuring myself against a ghost. I saw it at the farmer's market and thought of you, Julian said, for your porch. Said every woman should know how to cook something that makes people beg for seconds. I've missed this, he admitted. After my father left, she defined herself by his absence. Everything in her life, her bitterness, her warnings to me, her string of bad relationships, it all came back to him leaving. I built my life around not needing anyone. But sometimes I wonder if that's just another way of letting the past control me. No one makes jerk chicken like you do. Listen, why don't you come visit me instead? You haven't even seen my new house. But I'm glad we're figuring it out together. It was something permanent, meant to stay with her house, a sign that Julian understood how important this place was to her. Naomi felt her heart speed up, anticipation coursing through her veins. Of what? The summer evening was warm, fireflies beginning to flicker in the gathering dusk, like coming home to a place she had forgotten she missed. Even when I was trying to hate you. I've been wanting to do that since the day I saw you again, he admitted, his voice low. The new wind chime hung from the porch roof, tinkling softly in the gentle breeze. Maybe, but I'm glad we're past that now. Of this. This time his lips found hers in a kiss that was gentle at first, then deeper as Naomi responded, her arms sliding around his neck. You never were very good at hating anyone. I just wanted you to know that finding you again, it feels like maybe this is where I'm supposed to be, where I can finally be myself. Julian stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious in the glow of the streetlights. I understand that fear, Naomi. I feel it too. He reached up, his fingers gently brushing a curl from her face. Naomi looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, the man he had become. I want to believe that, she said. I want to trust this. But, Julian prompted, sensing her hesitation. But I need you to understand something. Julian smiled, relief clear in his eyes. I wouldn't want you to, Julian replied, his eyes warm with understanding. His words washed over Naomi like a gentle wave, soothing the anxiety that had been building inside her. Well then, she said with a small smile, I guess we're on the same page. As they walked back to the car hand in hand, Naomi felt lighter than she had in years. The drive home was quiet, comfortable. When they reached their houses, Julian walked Naomi to her door. I had a wonderful time, Julian said softly. So did I. Julian leaned forward, and for a moment Naomi thought he might kiss her. Good night, Naomi, he whispered before stepping back, respecting the boundaries they had set, taking things slow. Good night, Julian. As she watched him walk across their adjoining yards to his own house, Naomi touched her cheek where his lips had been. Some things, it seemed, remained the same. In the weeks that followed, Naomi and Julian settled into a new rhythm. Coffee before Naomi's shifts, late dinners when she worked evenings, and slowly, carefully, they began to rebuild what had been broken between them. One Saturday morning, as they worked together planting the flowers Mrs. Holloway had given them along their shared property line, Julian's phone rang. "I need to take this," he said. "It's my mother." Naomi nodded, continuing to dig small holes for the bright pink begonias. "Mom, we talked about this." When Julian returned, his face was drawn, tension visible in the set of his shoulders. "Everything okay?" Naomi asked. Julian sighed, kneeling back down beside her. "My mother. Difficult how?" "She wants me to fly out to Seattle, visit his grave with her, stay for a week, same as every year." "That must be hard for you," Naomi said softly. Julian nodded, not looking up. Naomi reached out, placing her hand over his, stilling his agitated movements. Julian finally met her eyes. "For a long time, I was stuck too, living in his shadow even after he was gone. Is that why you moved here, started over?" "Partly," Julian admitted. The admission hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. "Julian," Naomi began, not sure what to say. "You don't have to respond to that," he said quickly. Naomi squeezed his hand, understanding more than she could express. "So what will you do about your mother?" Julian sighed. "I'll go out for the weekend, not the whole week. That sounds like a good plan." They returned to their planting, working in comfortable silence. She admired that more than she could say. The following Friday, Naomi invited Julian over for dinner. She prepared her grandmother's famous jerk chicken, rice and peas, and a fresh salad. Julian arrived with a bottle of wine and a small gift bag. Inside was a beautiful wind chime made of sea glass and driftwood. The thoughtfulness of the gift touched Naomi deeply. "It's perfect," she said. "Thank you." Dinner was relaxed, filled with easy conversation and laughter. Julian raved about her cooking, especially the chicken. "My grandmother's recipe," Naomi explained. "She taught me when I was 12. "Well, consider me begging," Julian laughed, helping himself to another piece. After dinner, they moved to Naomi's back porch with glasses of wine. "I've been thinking about what you said," Naomi said after a while, "about your mother being stuck in the past." Julian nodded, waiting for her to continue. "My mother was like that too, in a way." "And you decided not to be like her," Julian observed. "I tried," Naomi agreed. Julian's eyes were thoughtful in the fading light. "Maybe we're both still figuring out how to be free of our ghosts." "Maybe," Naomi said softly. Then, gathering her courage, she added, Julian reached for her hand, his fingers warm against hers. "So am I." The moment felt significant, a conscious choice to move forward, to explore what might be possible between them now, as the people they had become. Later, as they stood at Naomi's front door saying goodnight, Julian hesitated, his eyes searching hers for permission. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Julian leaned in. It was both familiar and new, the feel of him, the taste. When they finally broke apart, Julian rested his forehead against hers. "Me too," Naomi confessed. Julian laughed softly. "I tried my best with you." "I deserved it." Naomi smiled, her fingers lightly tracing the line of his jaw. Julian kissed her once more, briefly, but with promise. "Good night, Naomi." "Good night, Julian." As she closed the door behind him, Naomi leaned against it, her lips still tingling from his kiss. She had expected to feel afraid, vulnerable. Instead, she felt happy. Genuinely, simply happy in a way she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a very long time. The weekend before Julian was due to fly to Seattle for the anniversary of his brother's death, a summer storm hit Raleigh. Heavy rain pounded the roofs, wind bent the trees, and thunder crashed overhead. Naomi was at home, catching up on laundry and housework on her day off, when her phone rang. It was Julian. "Hey, are you home?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. "Yes? Why? Have you looked at your backyard? The big oak tree between our properties, I think the storm damaged it. There's a huge limb hanging down." Sure enough, a massive branch from the old oak tree had partially broken away and was now precariously suspended, hanging directly over her back porch. Naomi went to her back window and peered out through the curtain of rain. "I see it," she said. "That doesn't look good. We'll just have to hope it holds until morning. I've called a tree service, but with the storm they can't come until tomorrow." "It's not," Julian confirmed. "If it falls, it could damage your roof." "Well, there's nothing we can do tonight," Naomi reasoned. "Why don't you come over here just for tonight?" "I don't like the idea of you staying there with that thing ready to fall," Julian said. "Thank you, this is very kind. Is that what we're calling it these days?" Julian welcomed them in, taking her wet jacket and the small overnight bag she had packed. "I couldn't let you stay there with that branch about to fall. What kind of neighbor would I be?" Naomi hesitated. They had been taking things slowly, rebuilding their relationship step by careful step. Staying at Julian's house, even just because of the storm, felt like a big leap. "Fair point. I find you pretty exciting all on your own. What would you call it?" "Bathrooms across the hall. I put out fresh towels." Naomi melted into it, her hands sliding up his chest to his shoulders. "I'll let you get settled," he said, his voice a little rough. "I'm making pasta for dinner. Nothing fancy." It was simply furnished but comfortable, with a queen-sized bed, a small desk, and a bookshelf filled with music books and novels. They settled on his couch, a respectable distance between them at first. Natural. "I've missed this," he said quietly. "Just being with you. It was always so easy." As if they had done this 100 times before. But as the film progressed, Naomi found herself moving closer until she was tucked against his side, his arm around her shoulders. "And I understand now why you left the way you did. I just wish—" She trailed off, not sure how to express the years of pain and longing. On the bedside table was a framed photo she recognized, Julian and his brother David, at what looked like David's college graduation. David had his arms slung around Julian's shoulders, both of them laughing at the camera. The people they had been at 20 wouldn't have weathered the storms that came their way. But now they were stronger, more certain of themselves and what they wanted. Dating. I used to torture myself with those questions, but lately I've been thinking, maybe we needed this time apart, to become who we are now, to be ready for each other again. Without thinking, Naomi leaned up and kissed him, trying to express through actions what she wasn't ready to say in words. Julian's hands were in her hair, then skimming down her sides. Naomi pressed closer, her body remembering his touch even as her mind registered the differences. He was broader now, more solid, his hands more confident in their exploration. Julian would be flying to Seattle, facing his mother's grief and his own. For everything that happened, I know I've said it before, but I need you to know how much I regret hurting you. But when Julian's lips moved to her neck, Naomi gently pushed against his chest. "And what really matters to you, Julian Park?" And here she was, staying in his house, rekindling something that had once been so important to both of them. Courting. This was what had always set Julian apart, his ability to give without demanding, to understand her needs, sometimes better than she understood them herself. Want that, but for the record, I would wait forever if that's what you needed. What might have been different if I'd gotten your letter? Naomi woke early, the unfamiliar surroundings momentarily confusing her before she remembered she was in Julian's guest room. His suitcase stood by the door, ready for his afternoon flight to Seattle. "You matter more than I can say. Your guest bed is more comfortable than mine." It struck Naomi how natural this felt, waking up in Julian's house, sharing coffee, planning the day. "They'll be here at 10 to take care of that branch. I'll need to show them what needs to be done before I leave for the airport." As if they had been doing it for years, not just one night, if we'd found a way back to each other then. As Naomi closed the door behind her, she leaned against it, emotions swirling inside her. It was touching, even if her independent side bristled slightly at the implication she needed looking after. "Having a torrid affair? You must have things to do before your flight. I'm all packed, and I'd feel better seeing it taken care of myself." Not for forever. They examined the damaged branch, which looked even more precarious in the daylight, but for now, "There's some rot starting in the trunk," he explained, pointing to a dark area where the limb had broken away. "Isn't there anything else we can do? Treatment or—" You might want to think about taking the whole tree down before the next big storm, but eventually it's coming down one way or another. This was ready to come down. Might have taken out your porch if it fell wrong. Small steps towards something bigger. As the tree service packed up their equipment, he turned to Naomi. It's your tree, technically, on your property line. Whatever you decide, I'll support. Until we're both sure. But as she watched, the branch swayed dangerously in another gust of wind. Okay, she agreed. Let me pack a few things, and Charlie, of course. I need to head to the airport soon. Of course, Julian laughed. Pepper will be thrilled. Julian would only be gone for the weekend, yet she found herself worrying about him, about the emotional weight of his trip. Charlie and Pepper had spent the morning playing together and now lay exhausted on Julian's living room rug, apparently unwilling to be separated. 20 minutes later, Naomi dashed through the rain to Julian's front door, Charlie splashing happily beside her. I'll come by to feed him and let him out. Might be good company for Pepper while you're gone. Julian stood beside Naomi in her backyard, watching the process with a protective air that she found both amusing and endearing. The guest room is all ready for you, he said, leading her upstairs. He'd be alone most of the day anyway. You're the most capable person I've ever met, but that doesn't mean you have to do everything alone. Naomi smiled at his nervous hospitality. It's nothing, Julian shrugged. Neighbor, Naomi repeated with a raised eyebrow. Julian laughed, some of his nervousness fading. Naomi pretended to consider the question. I like the sound of that last one, Julian teased, stepping closer. Very dramatic. They talked about safe topics, work, neighbors, plans for their yards, carefully avoiding the more serious subjects that hung between them. Well, we are in the suburbs, Naomi replied with mock seriousness. We have to create our own excitement. Julian's arms slipped around her waist, drawing her against him. I don't know about that. His kiss was more confident this time, less hesitant. When they broke apart, Julian's eyes were dark with desire, but he stepped back slightly, respecting the boundaries they had set. Sounds perfect. As Julian headed back downstairs, Naomi took a moment to look around the guest room. The sight gave Naomi pause. Tomorrow was the anniversary of David's death. Life had a strange way of bringing things full circle. Dinner was cozy, the storm raging outside, making Julian's warm kitchen feel even more inviting. After they'd washed the dishes together, Julian suggested a movie. It felt right. When the movie ended, Julian didn't move immediately, seeming content to hold her a little longer. Naomi nodded against his shoulder. Until it wasn't. Julian's arm tightened around her slightly. I'm sorry for that. I believe you, Naomi said, shifting to look up at him. What? Julian prompted gently. What do you wish? I wish we hadn't lost so much time, she admitted. 10 years, Julian. Julian considered this, his fingers absently stroking her arm. The wisdom in his words struck Naomi deeply. Perhaps he was right. When did you get so wise? She asked with a small smile. Heartbreak will do that to you, Julian replied, only half joking. Makes you think about what really matters. Naomi reached up, her hand gently cradling his face. His eyes, dark and serious, held hers. Being true to myself, making music that touches people. And you, Naomi. The honesty in his voice, the vulnerability, touched something deep inside her. The kiss deepened, years of separation and longing, fueling a passion that quickly spiraled beyond their control. It would be so easy to get lost in this moment, to let desire override caution. Wait, she whispered. We should slow down. Julian immediately pulled back, his breathing uneven but his eyes clear. You're right, I'm sorry, I got carried away. Don't apologize, Naomi said, her own pulse racing. I wanted that too. But we're taking things slow, Julian finished for her. And tomorrow I leave for Seattle, and this us, it deserves better timing. Naomi nodded, relieved that he understood. Exactly. Julian brushed a curl from her face, his touch gentle. The simple statement, delivered without drama or expectation, made Naomi's heart swell. Thank you, she said softly. They said goodnight at the guest room door, Julian's kiss soft and respectful. She was falling for him again, Or perhaps she had never truly stopped loving him. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a clear blue sky and the fresh scent of rain-washed air. She found him in the kitchen, already dressed, making coffee. "Morning," he greeted her with a warm smile. "Sleep okay?" "Like a rock," Naomi admitted. "You're welcome to it any time," Julian said, handing her a cup of coffee prepared just the way she liked it, another detail he had remembered. They sat at his kitchen table, the morning sunlight streaming through the windows, highlighting the comfortable domesticity of the scene. "The tree service called," Julian said. "I can handle it," Naomi offered. Julian shook his head. Naomi understood his concern. It wasn't just about the tree, it was about making sure she was safe while he was away. "Okay," she agreed, "we'll both talk to them." At 10, the tree service arrived, 2 men with a truck full of equipment. "Good thing you called when you did," the older of the 2 men commented. They set to work, carefully removing the damaged limb section by section. "You know, I was managing just fine on my own before you moved in next door," she teased gently. Julian glanced at her, a smile tugging at his lips. "I know. Is that your subtle way of saying I should let people help me more often?" "Maybe," Julian admitted. "Or maybe just me." Before Naomi could respond, one of the workers called them over to inspect the tree now that the damaged branch had been removed. Naomi frowned. She loved that old oak, with its spreading branches that provided shade for both their yards. "We could cable it, add some supports," the man suggested. "Might give it a few more years." Julian thanked the workers, saying they would discuss options and call back with a decision. "But it affects your yard too," Naomi pointed out. "We should decide together." The words hung between them, laden with meaning beyond just the tree. Deciding together, thinking of we instead of I. Julian checked his watch reluctantly. "Of course." Naomi walked with him back to his house, where his suitcase waited by the door. "I think we have a problem," Julian laughed, nodding toward the dogs. "Charlie doesn't want to go home." "He can stay here if you don't mind," Naomi suggested. "Are you sure? What about you?" "I'll survive 3 days without my dog," Naomi assured him. "Besides, I have an extra shift tomorrow." Julian nodded gratefully. "Thanks. That would be good." As he gathered his things, Naomi felt a strange anxiety building inside her. "Julian," she said as he picked up his suitcase. "If you need to talk while you're there, if it gets hard with your mother, and you can call me anytime." The offer seemed to touch him deeply. Naomi held him close, feeling the tension in his body, understanding now what this trip cost him every year. "Thank you. I might take you up on that. And remember, you're not alone in this anymore." At the door, he set down his suitcase and pulled her into a tight embrace. "Be safe," she whispered. Naomi watched from the porch as he drove away, a strange emptiness settling inside her at the sight. Julian's arms tightened around her briefly before he stepped back. "That means more than you know." But somehow she already missed him. He kissed her goodbye, a kiss that felt like a promise, then headed to his car. Naomi found herself listening for the sound of his violin in the evenings, glancing out her window to see if his lights were on. It was only 3 days. Talking to him the whole time, like he could hear her. Being in Julian's house without him felt intimate somehow, a glimpse into his daily life. The books left open on the coffee table, the sheet music scattered across his piano, the coffee cup always rinsed but left to dry beside the sink. The house felt oddly quiet without Julian next door. "I'm glad I can be that person for you." Julian's name flashed on the screen. She checked on Pepper and Charlie twice a day, spending time playing with them in Julian's backyard, finding comfort in the simple routine. "I miss them, and I miss you." On Saturday night, her phone rang. "Hey," she answered, unable to keep the smile from her voice. "How's Seattle?" "Rainy," Julian replied. "Some things never change." The offer slipped out before Naomi could consider it, another small step toward intertwining their lives. "How was the cemetery?" Naomi asked gently. Julian paused. When they finally said goodnight, Naomi felt closer to him than ever, despite the miles between them. Puzzled, she went to answer it, expecting perhaps a package delivery. Anyway, we're at her house now. She's finally asleep. It was a rough day. Julian's ex-wife, Mina. Julian sighed. Hard. Mom brought enough flowers for a wedding. Spent an hour arranging them just so. I'm just taking care of the dogs. And you are. Look, I don't know why you're here, but Julian won't be back until tomorrow afternoon. I can tell him you stopped by. Maybe he can, Naomi said softly. In some way. I'm sorry. That was rude of me. No, this needs to be in person. I'll come back tomorrow. She turned to leave, then paused. Naomi closed the door slowly, unsure what to make of the encounter. He had loved someone else, married her, built a life that had nothing to do with Naomi, just as she had built her life without him. What had been so important that Mina needed to speak to Julian in person? And why did it feel like a warning had been delivered along with the compliment? You know, he talked about you sometimes, even during our marriage. I needed to talk to him about something important, something that can't wait. Naomi had taken the day off work to pick Julian up from the airport, a decision that felt significant, prioritizing their relationship over her usual dedication to her job. As she dusted his piano, her fingers trailed over the keys, remembering how she had once watched him play for hours, mesmerized by the passion in his face, the skill in his hands. Maybe. I'm sorry. 3 days shouldn't feel like a long separation, yet somehow it had. When he saw her, his face lit up with a smile that made her heart race. She had missed Julian more than she had expected to, more than made sense for their still new relationship. Don't be. It's actually better this year having someone to talk to about it, someone who understands. Naomi felt warmth spread through her at his words, that we were seeing where things might go. Mom and I had a good talk last night. Real talk, not just going through the motions. I think how his mother had admitted she'd been holding on to grief because it was easier than facing life without her eldest son. She wants to meet you again someday, when we're ready for that. They were moving quickly in some ways, despite their agreement to take things slow. But then again, perhaps 10 years apart had been slow enough, how she had finally acknowledged that Julian needed to live his own life, not the one David would have had. Mina? Did she say what she wanted? I think maybe she's finally ready to start moving forward. As if summoned by their conversation, Mina emerged from the car and walked toward them. He's a good man. Better than most. That's strange. We settled everything with the divorce. There shouldn't be anything left to discuss. Julian's past with Mina was separate from whatever he and Naomi were building now. Of course, I'll take your bag inside and check on the dogs. How are the dogs? Julian asked, changing the subject. What could be so important that Mina had come back a second day to discuss it? Inseparable, Naomi laughed. I think they're having a sleepover party when I'm not looking. His expression was unreadable, but there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. Julian's chuckle was a welcome sound. The tree still stood, wounded but surviving. Given time and care, it might recover, might continue to provide shade and beauty for years to come. The last time well, you know. The simple admission made Naomi's heart skip. I miss you too. The neighborhood's too quiet without your violin. 3 days and you're already used to having me around, Julian teased. Should I be flattered? Naomi forced herself to ask the question, though she dreaded the answer. Perhaps they too could heal, could grow stronger in the broken places. Nothing. The divorce stands, a baby. Julian's child with another woman, regular contact with his ex-wife for years to come. How could that not affect what was growing between them? Mina was very clear about that. She doesn't want to get back together. Julian's voice was hollow. She just found out last week, wanted to tell me in person. But if you're willing to navigate it with me, I promise I'll do everything I can to make it work. He was as scared as she was, maybe more so, but he was also determined, sure of what he wanted, despite this unexpected turn. Maybe a little, Naomi admitted. When do you get back? But it doesn't change how I feel about Mina or about... to think about what this means. He reached for Naomi's hand. About us. Monday afternoon. My flight lands at 2. What if Mina wanted to reconcile? Want me to pick you up? Julian's voice softened. I'd like that. Thank you. Julian squeezed her hand. But I need you to know that my feelings for you haven't changed. If anything, this makes me more certain about what I want. They talked for nearly an hour, Julian sharing stories about his brother that he'd never told her before, Naomi listening, offering comfort simply by being there. On Sunday afternoon, Naomi was at Julian's house watering his houseplants, another task she had volunteered for, when the doorbell rang. Instead, she found herself face to face with a tall, elegant woman she recognized immediately from that glimpse through the window weeks ago. Oh, Mina said, clearly as surprised to see Naomi as Naomi was to see her. I was looking for Julian. He's out of town until tomorrow, Naomi explained, feeling oddly defensive. Mina's eyes narrowed slightly as she took in the situation. Naomi in Julian's house, clearly comfortable enough to be answering his door. Naomi Sinclair, I live next door. Recognition flashed in Mina's eyes. Naomi, the college girlfriend. The description, so reductive of what she and Julian had shared, irked Naomi. That was a long time ago. We're neighbors now. Neighbors, Mina repeated skeptically. Is that what he's calling it? The implication was clear, and Naomi felt her hackles rise. Mina sighed, her posture softening slightly. Is there a message I can pass along? Mina hesitated, then shook her head. The admission caught Naomi off guard. He did? Not often, but enough that I knew you were important to him. Mina's expression was unreadable. Take care of him. Before Naomi could respond, Mina was walking back to her car, her posture straight and dignified. The incident left Naomi unsettled for the rest of the day, a reminder that Julian's life had continued without her for 10 years. Could they really bridge that gap? Find their way back to each other after so much time and so many changes? As evening fell, Naomi sat on her back porch, watching the spot where the damaged branch had been removed from the old oak tree. Like the tree, she and Julian had been damaged, but not destroyed. The thought comforted her as she watched the first stars appear in the darkening sky, counting the hours until Julian's return. Monday morning dawned bright and clear. She spent the morning cleaning her house, then Julian's, wanting everything to be perfect for his return. At 1:30, she headed to the airport, a nervous excitement building inside her. Or perhaps not so new. Perhaps what they had now was simply a continuation of what had started years ago, interrupted but not erased by time and circumstance. Naomi spotted Julian as soon as he emerged from the security area, his tall figure easy to pick out in the crowd. Hey, he said as he reached her, dropping his carry-on bag to pull her into a tight embrace. You're a sight for sore eyes. Naomi hugged him back, breathing in his familiar scent, feeling the solid warmth of him against her. How was the rest of your trip? Better than expected, actually, Julian said as they walked toward the exit. That's wonderful, Julian. In the car, Julian told her about the conversation with his mother, how they had stayed up late looking at old photos, sharing memories of David, but also talking about the future for the first time in years. She asked about you, Julian added as they neared home. I told her we had reconnected. Naomi glanced at him. What did she say? She said she always liked you back in college, thought you were good for me. Julian smiled. The casual way he spoke of a future together, of meeting family, made Naomi's stomach flutter with a mixture of anxiety and hope. As they pulled into Julian's driveway, Naomi remembered her unexpected visitor. Oh, Mina stopped by yesterday looking for you. Julian turned to her, surprise evident on his face. Just that it was important and couldn't wait. She said she'd come back today. A frown creased Julian's brow. Before Naomi could respond, they both noticed the black Mercedes parked across the street. Julian sighed, squeezing Naomi's hand briefly before getting out of the car to greet his ex-wife. Mina, Naomi said you came by yesterday. I need to talk to you, Mina said, her eyes flicking briefly to Naomi, who had also gotten out of the car. Privately. Julian glanced at Naomi, apology in his eyes. Give me a few minutes? Naomi nodded. As she carried Julian's suitcase into his house, Naomi tried not to speculate about what Mina might want. It wasn't her business, but as she waited inside, petting Pepper and Charlie, who were overjoyed at Julian's return, she couldn't help feeling anxious. Naomi tried to busy herself with the dogs, but her mind kept circling back to Julian and Mina outside. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 15 minutes, the front door opened and Julian entered alone. "Everything okay?" Naomi asked, trying to keep her voice casual. Julian ran a hand through his hair, that familiar nervous gesture that always gave away his stress. "Mina's pregnant." The words hit Naomi like a physical blow. "What?" Julian sat heavily on the couch beside her. "She's 3 months along. Says it happened right before the divorce was finalized." Naomi felt as if the floor had dropped out from under her. "So you're going to be a father?" "Apparently." "What? What does this mean for you two?" Julian looked at her directly. "But a baby changes everything." "Yes and no," Julian sighed. "It means I'll be co-parenting with my ex-wife for the next 18 years. It means I'll have financial responsibilities." Naomi wanted to believe him, but the reality of the situation was sinking in, and with it came doubt. "Naomi," Julian said softly, sensing her withdrawal. "Talk to me. What are you thinking?" "I don't know what to think," she admitted. "This is a lot to process." "I know. Believe me, I'm still processing it myself." "Which is?" "You," Julian said simply. "A chance for us." "I know this complicates things." Naomi looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, the vulnerability. "I need some time," she said finally. Julian nodded. Disappointment visible in his face, but understanding too. "Of course. Take all the time you need." Naomi stood, suddenly needing space. "I should go home. You must be tired from your trip." "Naomi, we'll talk later," she promised, cutting off whatever he had been about to say. I need to be alone right now." Julian walked her to the door, Charlie trailing behind them. "He can stay here tonight if you want," Julian offered. "Give you some space." Naomi nodded gratefully. One less thing to worry about. "Thanks. For what it's worth, this doesn't change how I feel about you. Not one bit." At her door, Julian hesitated, then leaned in to place a gentle kiss on her cheek. Naomi tried to smile, but it felt forced. "Good night, Julian." The news had knocked the wind out of her, disrupting the careful balance they had been building. Inside her house, Naomi leaned against the closed door, emotions swirling inside her. A baby. Julian was going to be a father. Why did this bother her so much? Julian and Mina were already divorced. The night was quiet, stars visible between scattered clouds. Was she willing to accept not just him, but the new family he would soon have? But as she listened to the music drifting through the night, Naomi realized something important. Despite the shock, despite the fear, she couldn't imagine her life without Julian in it anymore. Somehow in the weeks since he had reappeared next door, he had become essential to her again. Could she trust him not to disappear from her life again, now that his priorities would inevitably shift? She took extra shifts at the hospital, leaving early and returning late, knowing he would respect her need for space. From Julian's house, she could hear the faint sound of his violin, mournful, questioning notes that seemed to echo her own confusion. Julian's name appeared on the dashboard screen. "I know you asked for time, and I'm trying to respect that. But I wanted to make sure you're okay. I haven't seen you around." The tree service called with some options for cabling it to keep it standing. I told them I needed to discuss it with you. The baby had been conceived when they were still technically married. It wasn't as if Julian had cheated or lied. She moved to her kitchen, making tea with mechanical motions, trying to sort through her feelings. A lifelong bond that Naomi would never be part of. And what place would Naomi have in the child's life if she and Julian stayed together? He looked tired, with shadows under his eyes suggesting he hadn't been sleeping well. Or there's wine, if you prefer. Afraid of committing to Julian only to lose him again. The normality of the scene, discussing property maintenance over coffee, felt surreal after the emotional upheaval of the past few days. Afraid of being second best, an afterthought compared to his new family obligations. Afraid of opening her heart fully, only to have it broken again. Stepmother, father's girlfriend, the neighbor. Yet it was also a symbol of their connection, rooted on the border between their properties, providing shade for them both. I've been thinking about everything, about us. The admission felt like stepping off a cliff, but Naomi continued, needing to get the words out. When you disappeared from my life 10 years ago, I closed a part of myself off, built walls to keep from being hurt that way again, and finding you here next door starting to let you back in, it's been terrifying and wonderful all at once. About what Mina's news means. She paused. It's a lot, Julian. I won't pretend it isn't. But I've realized something important. Because Mrs. Holloway keeps asking, and I'm not sure what to tell her. But the child would create a permanent connection between Julian and Mina. The questions tumbled through her mind, complex and unanswerable. But beneath them all was a simpler, more painful truth. She was afraid. Naomi took her tea to the back porch, needing the fresh air to clear her head. For the first time since hearing Mina's news, she felt like maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. They spent most evenings together, alternating between their houses. He and Mina established a civil, if somewhat distant, relationship focused solely on preparing for the baby. They attended doctor's appointments together, began discussing custody arrangements, and even went shopping for essential baby items. They walked their dogs together, worked in their yards side by side, and slowly began to merge their separate lives. You're part of Julian's life now, she explained during one awkward but well-intentioned coffee meeting. There were moments of jealousy, of uncertainty, of fear. But Naomi found strength in Julian's unwavering commitment to their relationship and in her own growing confidence that what they were building together was solid enough to withstand the challenges ahead. She asked, accepting the glass of wine he offered, which means you'll be part of the baby's life too. Beneath its branches, a small table had been set up with a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. We might as well get comfortable with each other. Do you remember our first real date in college? We had a picnic under that big oak tree by the lake. You said it was the most romantic spot on campus. The fact that her first instinct was to go to Julian's house, to face this together, told her everything she needed to know. She was still scared, still uncertain about the future. But she wasn't running away. She had to decide. Was what she felt for Julian strong enough to weather this unexpected complication? His expression grew more serious. That night, sitting under that tree with you, was the first time I thought to myself, this is it. She's the one. But when I saw this old oak tree standing right between our properties, it felt like a sign, like the universe was giving us another chance. There will be so many things to figure out. Not right away, but when we're both ready, when it feels right. When she arrived, she found the table set with candles and flowers, and Julian dressed more formally than usual. Naomi looked at Julian, at the man he had become, at the love in his eyes, at the future he was offering her. A future that wouldn't be perfect or easy, but that would be theirs, together. I'm asking you to promise that we'll face whatever comes next together, that we'll build a life that includes both our pasts and create something new, that we'll trust each other enough to never walk away again. As they stood beneath the oak tree, its lights twinkling around them like stars brought down to earth, Naomi felt a sense of homecoming deeper than anything she had experienced before. And I know we still have a lot to figure out. But Naomi, I lost you once. But it was Julian, his return to her life, his love, his commitment, that had truly made it a home. I don't want to waste another day without you knowing exactly how I feel. Julian's child, a daughter they learned at the 20-week ultrasound, would be born in February. Her house was slightly larger, with a room that could be converted into a nursery for the times when the baby would stay with them. They rented out Julian's house to a young professor from the community college, a temporary arrangement until they decided what to do with it long term. They wanted to establish a new normal before adding wedding plans to the mix. But if there's one thing I've learned in the past few weeks, it's that what we have, what we could have, is worth fighting for. At least I think it is, if you do too. I knew from the moment I saw you two together, she told them, patting Naomi's hand. "Some people just belong with each other." Throughout the meal, he seemed slightly nervous, checking his watch occasionally, glancing toward the window as if expecting something. Julian set up a small music studio in what had been Naomi's home office, which they relocated to a corner of the living room. Naomi finally showed Julian her piano-playing skills, limited but earnest, and he began giving her lessons on Sunday afternoons. The questions had no easy answers. The realization didn't solve everything, but it was a start. Naomi avoided Julian for the next 2 days, using work as an excuse. But on the third day, as she was driving home from a particularly exhausting shift, her phone rang through the car's Bluetooth. She hesitated, then accepted the call. "Hello?" "Hi," Julian's voice filled the car. "I've been working," Naomi explained. "Double shifts." "Ah." There was a pause. "Well, I was calling about the tree, actually." "The oak?" "The tree." Such a mundane concern compared to the emotional turmoil of the past few days. "I'm on my way home now," Naomi said. "We could talk about it then." "I'll put on some coffee," Julian offered. "Coffee is fine. I'll be there in 20 minutes. As she drove, Naomi realized she had made her decision. When she arrived, Julian opened the door before she could knock, as if he had been watching for her. "Hey," he said softly. "Thanks for coming." Naomi followed him to the kitchen, where 2 mugs of coffee waited on the table, along with a folder of information from the tree service. They sat across from each other, an awkward silence stretching between them until they both spoke at once. "I've been thinking about the baby." They stopped, exchanged small, uncertain smiles. "You first," Julian said. Naomi took a deep breath. "What's that?" "That I don't want to lose you again." Julian's eyes never left hers, hope beginning to replace the worry in his expression. "The baby complicates things," Naomi continued. "I'd be lying if I said it doesn't." Julian reached across the table, taking her hands in his. "I do, more than anything." "It won't be easy," Naomi warned. "We'll figure them out together," Julian promised. "One day at a time." The certainty in his voice, the warmth in his eyes, eased something tight in Naomi's chest. "So," Julian said, a smile beginning to curve his lips, "does this mean we're officially dating?" Naomi couldn't help but laugh, the tension of the past few days breaking. "Yes, I suppose it does. God help us both." Julian's smile widened to a grin. "I'll take those odds." Over the next month, Naomi and Julian settled into a new rhythm. Julian was determined to be involved in his child's life from the beginning. To Naomi's surprise, Mina made an effort to include her in some of these preparations. It wasn't always easy. One evening in late August, as summer began to give way to early hints of fall, Julian invited Naomi to dinner at his house. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion," Julian replied with a suspiciously innocent smile. "Just felt like doing something special." Dinner was delicious. Julian had prepared all her favorites, from the appetizer to the dessert. "Okay, what's going on?" Naomi finally asked as they finished dessert. "You've been acting strange all evening." Julian took a deep breath. "I have something to show you. Come with me?" Curious, Naomi followed him to the back door. When he opened it, she gasped in surprise. The old oak tree that stood between their properties was illuminated with hundreds of tiny white lights, transforming it into something magical against the darkening sky. "Julian, what is this?" He took her hand, leading her across the yard to stand beneath the tree. Naomi nodded, the memory coming back to her with perfect clarity. "You brought strawberries and that terrible cheap wine." Julian laughed. "Hey, I was a broke college student. But yes, that's the one." Naomi's heart began to race as Julian continued. "When I found this house, I had no idea you would be next door." Julian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Naomi's breath caught in her throat. "I know it might seem fast," Julian said, his voice soft but steady. He opened the box to reveal a beautiful ring, a simple solitaire diamond set in white gold, elegant and timeless. "I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow," Julian clarified, "or next month, or even next year." Tears filled Naomi's eyes, as Julian dropped to one knee beneath the oak tree. "Naomi Sinclair, will you marry me?" The moment stretched between them, filled with possibility. "Yes," she said, her voice catching on the word. "Yes, Julian, when we're ready." Julian slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms, his kiss full of promise and joy. The house she had bought had given her independence, security, pride. The engagement was long by mutual agreement. There was too much happening, too many adjustments to make for them to rush into marriage. In October, Julian officially moved in with Naomi. Mrs. Holloway was delighted by the development, taking full credit for their reunion. As fall deepened toward winter, they settled into domestic life together. Their dogs already inseparable, adjusted easily to living under one roof. Charlie claimed Julian's side of the bed as his favorite spot, while Pepper preferred to sleep on the floor near the bedroom door, as if standing guard. They discussed the future, not just the baby's arrival, but their eventual wedding, potential career changes, even the possibility of having a child of their own someday. Nothing was off the table, no topic too difficult to address. She had started dating someone new, a doctor she had met at one of her prenatal appointments, and wanted them to meet him. The evening was slightly awkward but ultimately successful, establishing a foundation for the co-parenting relationship they would all need to maintain. They had learned the hard way that communication was the foundation of trust, and trust was what would keep them together through whatever challenges lay ahead. In late November, Mina invited them both to dinner. As they drove home that night, Julian reached across the console to take Naomi's hand. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For being so amazing about all of this, about Mina, about the baby." "It's not always easy," she admitted. "But it's worth it. But I never get tired of hearing it. You're worth it." Inside, on the first page, was a note in Julian's handwriting. "Some chapters have already been written. Some were lost along the way. But the best ones are still to come. I love you, Julian." It was their first holiday as a couple, the first of many they would share. "We're worth it. I thought we could write in it together, our memories, our plans, our dreams, something to look back on years from now to remind us of how far we've come. I know it can't be easy." She said Lily should get to know her second mother from the beginning. The term sent a wave of emotion through Naomi. "Then yes," she said, "I'd love to hold her." Naomi squeezed his hand. This wasn't the life she had planned. It was messier, more complicated, filled with unexpected twists and compromises. But it was also richer, deeper, more meaningful than anything she could have imagined. The old oak tree, now bare of leaves for winter, stood sentinel between what had once been their separate homes, its branches reaching toward both houses, as if trying to draw them closer together. Naomi looked up to find Julian watching them, his eyes filled with love for both of them. Julian brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her fingers. Julian was in the delivery room with Mina, while Naomi waited anxiously in the hospital lobby with both sets of grandparents. Seeing him hold his daughter for the first time, watching him fall instantly in love with the tiny bundle in his arms, only made her love him more. "Trust me, that's a win with a newborn." "Have I told you lately that I love you?" "Yes," Naomi smiled. The old oak tree, which they had decided to save with careful cabling and treatment, sprouted fresh green leaves. The flowers Mrs. Holloway had given them bloomed along the property line, no longer marking a boundary, but celebrating a union. Selling Julian's house would be the practical choice. No point in maintaining two properties side by side, but it also felt like closing a door on the separate lives they had once led. "Good, because I plan to tell you every day for the rest of our lives," Naomi asked, looking at the oak that stood between the properties, a reminder of how we found each other again. "Are you sure that's okay? We need to decide what to do with it." But there was something beautiful about it, preserving their individual spaces while creating something new that belonged to both of them. Just like their relationship, Julian and Naomi hosted dinner for their friends, Tanya from the hospital, several of Julian's colleagues from the college, and of course, Mrs. Holloway, who brought enough desserts to feed an army. Christmas arrived with a light dusting of snow, unusual for Raleigh but magical nonetheless. The house was warm with laughter and conversation, the tree in the corner sparkling with ornaments they had chosen together. After the guests had gone, they sat together on the couch, enjoying the quiet and the twinkling lights of the Christmas tree. Lily stirred in her sleep, making those small, perfect baby sounds that never failed to melt their hearts. "That day when I saw you standing in your driveway, I was so angry, so hurt. I thought having you next door would be the worst thing that could happen." She gestured to the peaceful scene around them, their home, their dogs, Julian's daughter sleeping nearby. "It's not what I planned. It's better." Charlie and Pepper dozed at their feet, a picture of contentment. "I have one more gift for you," Julian said, retrieving a small package from beneath the tree. They had weathered so much in the past year, finding each other again, working through old hurts, adapting to new circumstances, welcoming Lily into their lives. "I think we are." Through it all, their love had only grown stronger, more resilient. A small ceremony, just family and close friends. Then let's set a date. This fall, perhaps, under our oak tree? After all, she did bring us together in her own matchmaking way. The ceremony was small but meaningful, attended by those who had supported them through their journey. Tanya as Naomi's maid of honor, Julian's colleague from the college as his best man, Mrs. Holloway beaming in the front row. Naomi unwrapped it to find a beautiful leather-bound journal. Julian couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked toward him across the yard they now shared, her bouquet made of flowers from Mrs. Holloway's garden. Julian spoke of second chances and forgiveness, of the miracle of finding Naomi again when he least expected it. "Today, I promise that I will never leave again. That whatever challenges come our way, we'll face them together. That every morning when you wake up, I'll be there beside you, grateful for another day with the woman who holds my heart." Naomi spoke of walls coming down, of learning that true strength came not from standing alone, but from choosing to stand with someone who valued her independence as much as her love. "Today I promise to keep my heart open, to you, to Lily, to the family we're building together. I promise to remember that the greatest risk isn't loving too much, but not loving enough." Tables were set up on the lawn, decorated with autumn flowers and candles that would glow as evening approached. More than I ever thought possible. Mrs. Holloway had indeed baked the cake, 3 tiers of vanilla and raspberry, decorated with fresh flowers to match Naomi's bouquet. "And I promise to love you, Julian Park, with everything I am for all the days we have. Keep the original structures mostly intact, but create a shared space in the middle." She'll probably insist on baking the cake herself. "Maybe a sunroom, or a larger family room." Julian's eyes lit up as he described his vision. The houses that had once stood separate, symbols of their individual lives, would soon be joined as one, a physical manifestation of the journey they had taken from estrangement to reunion, from hurt to healing, from independence to partnership. Charlie and Pepper, wearing matching bandanas for the occasion, barked their approval. Even Lily seemed to understand the significance of the moment, reaching out from Mina's arms toward her father and his new bride with a happy gurgle. "Your house could be our main living space, and mine could be converted for other uses. My music studio, a guest area for when family visits, maybe an office for you." Julian's parents were there, his mother seeming truly happy for the first time in years. Even Naomi's mother had come, skeptical at first, but gradually won over by Julian's obvious devotion to her daughter. For our story, past, present, and future, but stronger for it, rooted deeply in shared ground, reaching skyward with renewed purpose. Tears pricked at Naomi's eyes as she traced her fingers over the words. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Do you remember what you said to me that day under the oak tree, when I proposed?" Julian slipped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. Naomi rested her head against his shoulder, feeling a profound sense of peace. "I'd like that." Outside, snow began to fall again, soft flakes drifting past the window. In February, Julian's daughter was born. Lily Park, 7 pounds, 3 ounces, with a head full of dark hair and her father's expressive eyes. When Julian finally emerged, his face alight with wonder and joy, Naomi knew, without a doubt, that she had made the right choice. "She's beautiful," Naomi said softly, peering at the sleeping infant. "Do you want to hold her?" Julian asked. Naomi hesitated, glancing toward Mina's room. Mina suggested it, actually. Second mother. As Julian carefully transferred his daughter into her arms, Naomi felt the last of her doubts melt away. Lily yawned and stretched in her arms, tiny fingers flexing against the blanket. "She likes you," he said softly. "How can you tell?" "She's not crying." Naomi laughed quietly, careful not to disturb the baby. "She's perfect, Julian. Absolutely perfect." Spring arrived, bringing new life to the yard Naomi and Julian now shared. One evening in April, as they sat on their back porch watching Lily sleep in her portable bassinet, it was her weekend with them, Julian brought up something that had been on his mind. "I've been thinking about my house," he said. "The rental agreement is up next month." Naomi nodded. It was a conversation they'd been putting off. "What are you thinking?" she asked. Julian hesitated. "I had an idea, but I'm not sure what you'll think of it." "Try me." "What if we kept both houses, but connected them, created one larger home for our growing family?" Naomi blinked in surprise. "Connected them, how?" "We could build a breezeway or a covered walkway between them." "And the tree?" "We build around it," Julian said simply. "Make it the centerpiece of our connected yard." Naomi considered the idea. It was unconventional, certainly. "I love it," she said finally. "It's perfect." Julian's smile was radiant. "Really? You're not just saying that?" "Really," Naomi assured him. "The house between us becomes the house that brings us together. It's poetic." Julian leaned over to kiss her, careful not to disturb Lily. "We should start planning right away. We'll need architects, permits." "Slow down," Naomi laughed. "We have time. Let's enjoy what we have now and build toward the future one step at a time." Julian nodded, his excitement tempered but not diminished. "You're right, as usual." They fell silent, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "Sometimes I still can't believe how everything turned out," Naomi said softly. "And now?" Julian prompted, his fingers lacing through hers. "Now I can't imagine my life without you in it, without all of this." Julian brought her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. "That I would marry you when we were ready." "Are we ready yet?" Julian asked, his eyes meeting hers. Naomi considered the question. "Yes," she said, certainty filling her voice. Julian's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Perfect," Naomi agreed. "Mrs. Holloway will be thrilled," Julian laughed. "And we'll let her," Naomi said. As the last light of day faded from the sky, they sat together in comfortable silence, holding hands, planning their future. The oak tree between them, once a boundary, now stood as a testament to their resilience, damaged just like them. On a perfect October day, with leaves of gold and crimson drifting down around them, Naomi and Julian were married beneath their oak tree. Mina came with baby Lily, now 8 months old and able to sit up on her own, dressed in a tiny flower girl outfit, though she was far too young to perform any duties. Naomi wore a simple ivory dress, elegant and understated. Their vows were personal, written by each of them to express the unique journey that had brought them to this moment. "10 years ago, I disappeared from your life," Julian said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "10 years ago, I closed myself off from the pain of losing you," Naomi responded, tears making her eyes shine. When they were pronounced husband and wife, the small gathering erupted in applause. The reception was held in their combined backyard, where construction had already begun on the breezeway that would connect their two houses. As they shared their first dance as husband and wife, Julian held Naomi close, swaying gently to the music played by a string quartet from the college. "Happy?" he asked softly. Naomi looked up at him, at the man who had once broken her heart and now had healed it completely. Julian's smile was tender as he pressed his forehead to hers. "We took the long way around, didn't we?" "Some journeys are like that," Naomi replied. "The destination matters more than the route. Worth every step, every detour, every wrong turn along the way." "And this is quite a destination," Julian said, glancing around at their home, their friends, their family. Soon they would be joined, creating a new home that honored both their separate journeys and their shared path forward. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the celebration, Naomi and Julian stood together beneath the oak tree where they had been married just hours before. Their fingers were intertwined, wedding bands catching the light, symbols of the promises they had made. Behind them, their two houses stood, one that Naomi had bought as proof of her independence, one that Julian had purchased, seeking a fresh start. And between them, the old oak tree continued to grow, its roots deepening, its branches reaching ever higher, a living reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things grow in the spaces between, in the connections we forge despite separation, in the love that finds its way home no matter how long the journey takes. The end.